let's begin with the challenger, Linda Thompson Gonzalez. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity to meet with you. Thank you, Representative Lamarca, as well. Thank you. I'm running because basically I feel I have the skill sets and the experience for this job. As a mother, small business attorney, assistant inspector general, senior diplomat, I have worked my entire career to really build trust across party lines to make our government work better for people. As a watchdog, I fought for U.S. taxpayers for good governance. I've been talking to the voters and for several months, and I've learned that people are feeling they've really been abandoned by their government. People wanted to get on their feet after COVID, but we've had a lot of issues, a very extreme agenda come up instead of addressing our primary concerns. Public safety is a huge concern, but the overriding concern right now is that we've exhausted our time and our taxpayer dollars supporting an extreme MAGA agenda that's upended our privacy contrary to provisions of our state constitution. And women's lives are really not safe when our government mandate puts our most personal health care decisions in the hands of politicians instead of our doctors. Chip has voted for a 15-week abortion ban with no exceptions for rape, incest, or human trafficking. So we really need to protect these victims of crime. You know, the U.S. has one of the highest maternal mortality rates of the industrialized countries, and we really need to keep our women safe, not put them further in threat. As I said, public safety is a huge concern as well, and we need gun safety legislation.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Linda Thompson Gonzalez. Chip Lamarca, you have the floor.
Thank you, Steve. And first, I want to wish my opponent, Linda, a happy birthday. It's her birthday today.
Thank you, Chip. That's very kind. Thank you.
So, look, I think one of the things that's interesting about this district, it's now 100, it used to be 93. Coastal Broward residents know me. I've been talking to them since 2005 when I was a city commissioner in Lighthouse Point. For 8 years at the county commission, we accomplished something that many said couldn't be done in 20 years, and that was to renourish our beaches, continue to expand Port Everglades, things like that. Those are issues I've brought with me in a very, I'd say, bipartisan nature. Look, folks know that I consistently buck leadership when I need to, buck my own party when I need to. The fact is, we do talk about a lot of the same issues. The economy is thriving in Florida as opposed to the rest of the country. Why is that? Because we safely reopened after COVID. We protected our seniors. We protected our vulnerable. We removed our seniors in nursing homes, for example, from the dangers of other people coming in there. We kept them safe. Moving forward into a lot of the important issues right now are the economy and public safety, as well as the environment. In the public safety arena, I agree with Linda. Public safety is very important, and that's why the FOP, the PBA, and IUPA sheriff's deputies have stood behind me, along with all the firefighter organizations. And that's because they know that I look out for their well-being and their futures, their families, whether it's firefighter cancer bills or making sure that we don't restrict them to being on the job for too long, where it could be dangerous to their health and PTSD issues, things like that. With respect to the economy and jobs, I mean, I think it's clear about $25 billion worth of wealth, personal wealth, has been moved to the state of Florida from other states like Chicago, Illinois, and New York. And people have brought not just their families and a vacation home here, they've brought their business. And I think that's because the state of Florida is open, and we've got $21 billion in reserves. And just like what happened last week, which is a terrible tragedy, we are very suited for making sure we have the funds for a rainy day. And quite honestly, it's pouring out, and thank God we did that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chip Lamarca. I want to stay with you for a second. As you said in your opening statement, quote, "I buck my party when I need to." One of the questions in this race is whether you buck your party often enough, considering your constituency. And I looked at the numbers. We've got almost an identical number of Democrats and Republicans in House District 100, according to the Supervisor of Elections. Defend, please, right now, defend your votes for example, House Bill 5, the abortion restriction bill with no exception for rape or incest. House Bill 7, which restricted and changed what can be taught in our public schools. And I'll mention one more. This is a bill that was vociferously opposed by the cities in your district. Senate Bill 620, allowing businesses to sue local governments if ordinances reduce their profits. Go ahead.
Thank you, Steve, for the question. I'll take you even further back. In first session, I bucked the party and voted for HB1, which was the union busting bill, and I think that that didn't necessarily get me their support next time, but I did what was right by the people of Broward County. I also bucked my party and voted against the school safety bill in 2019 because it included the possibility of arming teachers, which I did not support. In the 2020 through 2022 cycle that you mentioned a few bills, let's talk about the parental rights and education bill, which I had a real good ear to the ground in Broward County and in my district, and there was certain opposition against it, and I did not support that bill. You mentioned the abortion bill, House Bill 5. I've never made any way to hide the fact that I'm a pro-life Catholic. I have made sure that abortion is safe and legal but rare in the state of Florida. What we did was basically codify Roe v. Wade, which is what my opponent and her supporters have said we should do at the federal level. We have done that by putting a date on that, and that's first trimester. But we also made sure that every exemption, every you mentioned rape, incest, and health of the mother, human trafficking, all of that is included in the 15-week period. Furthermore, as a child of a single parent, my mother raised my brother and I since I was 1 year old when I lost my dad. If the health of the mother was not in that bill, I would not have voted for it. With respect to the bill with regards to local governments being able to be sued by businesses, what we saw after COVID, and I'm not picking any particular District 100 government, but we saw places around the state of Florida that kept small businesses from being able to go back open, and affected their bottom line, affected their ability to feed their families. I'll always fight for local businesses. I am a local government person with my experience, but when local governments, just like if local businesses or any other special interest group is out of line, I'll stand up for what is right.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I just want to give Linda Thompson Gonzalez a chance to respond to anything she's just heard from Chip, and then I'll turn it to you, Dan. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, there is no exception for rape, incest, and our victims of crime in this 15-week ban. But I want to go back to the issue of it was the Biden administration really dollars that came in that have allowed us to have the budget reserves and so on, about $10 billion of Biden funding this year and past year. But we've got an agenda that is an extreme agenda this year. It's attacked people's voting rights. It's changed our congressional districts. We've taken away 2 minority congressional seats in this state. This has been an extreme agenda that is not working in the long-term interests of people in this district or of our state. And I just, the kind of cavalier attitude towards people's rights, women's rights. We've had a vote against our history, against our communities, our LGBTQ community. These children are erased in our schools, and their presence and speaking about them. So we've got a lot of concerns with this agenda and his voting record this last time. And I think voters are ready to hold him accountable.
Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. Representative Lamarca, you said that this law essentially basically codifies Roe v. Wade. The Roe v. Wade decision found that a woman could choose to have an abortion until a fetus becomes viable, based on the right to privacy in the Due Process Clause. Viability, as generally understood then and now, is somewhere between 23 and 27 weeks after conception. So how is a 15-week ban codifying Roe v. Wade?
Simple. It's up to the first trimester, Dan. And with respect to timing, look, my opponent said I was somehow my response to the last question was cavalier. Not in any way or such a way, shape, or form. She also mentioned our LGBTQ community. She fails to tell the truth about my record, and she did this last time. I voted against that bill, and I think you know that because you actually highlighted that on social media, that I voted against the party on that issue.
voted for it in the committee, which is the important vote because it got it out of the committee. You voted, you voted for it the first time. Yes, it's true in the final version, but that was when there was already sufficient votes to ensure that it would pass. But you voted for it out of committee. You voted against the trans athletes. That is why Equality Florida has endorsed me. The LGBTQ caucus has endorsed me.
Dan, are we going to speak out of turn and interrupt? I mean, you asked me a question about something, but Equality Florida does not endorse Republicans. It doesn't happen. I was in Leadership Florida with the CEO of Equality Florida. They have an agenda, just like other special interests. I actually vote for the LGBT community here in District 100, no doubt. And by the way,
all endorsed
those that are heard in committee and first stop committee, it's typical, and Steve knows this from being in Tallahassee for decades, that bills are moved through the process with the due respect of the person sponsoring the bill, so they can get a full hearing on it.
I wanted to ask you about something you said on your questionnaire as well, Representative Lamarca, about the DeSantis' use of public. The question is DeSantis' use of public funds in the state budget to transport migrants from Texas to Massachusetts. And you said the surge of illegal immigration has caused our southern border states a tremendous burden, causing a financial and humanitarian crisis. This action by the governor was funded in the budget that over 97% of all House members, including the majority of Democrats, voted for. In the Senate, it was unanimous on both sides. First off, I have two questions about that. First off, are you saying that a vote for the budget is an approval of every line item in that budget?
Absolutely not.
Okay, because so when you say, hey, this was in the budget and everybody voted for the budget, that makes it sound like that's kind of what you're saying.
I was pointing it out. I'm not saying that one leads to another, but look, the response from my perspective, and I'm always honest in these conversations with you guys. In my mind, his response was probably not ideal. But look, he's frustrated. Texas is frustrated. Arizona, New Mexico, they've had a surge of migrants come across the border. What is the difference between what he did there and tens of thousands of migrants being relocated around the country, whether it's buses or jets from the Biden administration? For me, look, the end result, yes, it wasn't ideal. If I was in his position, I wouldn't have done that. That said, we are now talking about the border crisis. We were not talking about the border crisis 3 weeks ago as a country on every major mainstream media news channel, and I watch them all.
You also said that my second question about that, you said that the action by the governor was funded in the budget. As well as anybody here, the wording in the budget was to take migrants from Florida, which he did not do, unless you include the brief stopover in Crestview. So how was this an action that was funded in the budget? Again,
not ideal, not the way I would have done it. But if you look at the folks that are being brought to Florida, sent to Florida, that get to Florida, that becomes a Florida issue. Look, again, that particular, you're asking a question of what I thought of his decision. I think that's really a question you should ask him when you interview him. I said I would have done things differently, but I know that migration and immigration to our state, although vital in the right way, I have an uncle who's a Catholic priest in Pahokee for 20 years. I understand about migrant workers in every industry, whether it's machinery or agriculture or educated folks who come here for a better life. My wife's parents came here for a better life and away from political persecution. The reality is I disagree with how it was handled. At the same time, we're now talking about the issue.
I want to know
for the record, I would point out that we'd be more than happy to interview the governor, and we would look forward to interviewing him in an endorsement in the governor's race. But historically, he doesn't do interviews with local media or with mainstream media, and we're not Fox News. So one other thing I want to one final question about this though. You mentioned the flights that the Biden administration sends migrants to other places. Do you consider that to be an equivalency here? Is that, are they doing more or less the same thing that DeSantis did on a much smaller level?
I don't even think that's the issue. I think it's all wrong. I think we need to stop the open border, and those who actually claim that we don't have an open border have never actually stood there and watched the process. We do look as a nation of immigrants. We accept people who are seeking a better life, especially away from political persecution or harm or danger to their families. But if you don't allow a state to have a border, I mean, look, if this was coming from the northern border, maybe it would be a different conversation. But I think the entire thing is wrong, and I think we need to go back to the table. And this is, as my opponent knows, and as you guys know, this is a federal issue. We need people who are willing to go to Washington, serve one term, whatever it takes to do it, and pass comprehensive immigration reform. We saw the Gang of Eight try it. It needs to be done. We need to put this issue behind us as a country. Quite honestly, we do need legal immigrants to this country and a process, but we're way backed up, and there's no way they can handle people coming in at the pace they're coming in through the courts.
Do you think Venezuelans should have temporary protected status, or do you think they should be able to seek political asylum in this country?
I think both are true. I voted for issues very similar to that at the county commission. I think they're facing very similar issues that my in-laws faced in Castro's Cuba, and I think we should receive them. We could come up with a plan to make sure that one state doesn't bear the brunt of the quantity of people that are coming in, and make sure that there's an option to go somewhere. Again, you're asking me about something that someone else did. If I was sitting in that seat, I would have done it differently.
Okay, thank you.
I want to stay with you for 1 second more, Representative Lamarca, and also bring Linda Thompson Gonzalez into this conversation very quickly too. On August 18th, you stood with Ron DeSantis in the Broward County Courthouse when he announced the arrests of 20 people on voter fraud charges. These people who were arrested were predominantly older voters. Many were Black. They were not all from Broward County. They were from a multitude of counties. There is a question as to whether or not they voted illegally. It'll be resolved by the courts. I think you'll agree. But this has been what happened that day in the courthouse has been characterized by opponents, including Democrats, as a stunt, as a form of voter suppression. Because you were there that day with the governor, do you wholeheartedly support everything he's done in this case?
I was there for election security. And let me be clear, the idea of voter suppression comes up if you bring up a picture ID, if you say that there's a process to follow. The last two cycles of the Florida House meeting, we have had election security bills both times. And you know who told me to vote for that election security bill? It was a former county commissioner colleague of mine who was running against another former colleague of mine on the county commission that said she saw open voter fraud with respect to stuffing ballot boxes and things like that. What we want to do in the state of Florida, and why I was standing next to Governor DeSantis and proud to be there that day with all of our law enforcement folks, as well as our Attorney General, the late Pete Antonacci, God rest his soul, and other folks there, was very simple, Steve. It was to make the voting process in Florida easy to do, but hard to cheat. All we want to do is make sure that everybody has access. Look, when I was back in the county commission, we extended the early voting period of time, which I wholeheartedly support, to almost 2 weeks. And we also added postage for every voting member of Broward County who wanted to mail their ballot in. So there would never be an excuse that if somebody said, well, I didn't have the money for the postage, or I couldn't get to a ballot box, they can use the United States Postal Service, which, look, some folks in my party may not agree. I still think the U.S. Postal Service will get the ballot there, given enough time, and I still have faith in the election process here. Okay,
Linda Thompson Gonzalez, what is your view of that event that the governor did, the strategy about targeting these voters and Chip Lamarca's participation, or attendance, I should say, at the event?
Well, I think it's one more example of political stunts. Taking people as political props for a political agenda, using his office here. And I think Floridians are paying a price for all of this. First of all, taking immigrants. We need immigrants. We do not have food on our table in this state, in this country, if we do not have immigrants here to work. We need absolutely immigration reform on a national level, but we don't have people. The undocumented, the workers in agriculture have been specifically exempted from E-Verify and many things, because in recognition that they must be here. We don't have food on our table. We don't have meat packers. With respect to the voter fraud, this was one of the cleanest, fairest elections in her history. Even the governor acknowledged that. So the notion that we have voter fraud, we've made it harder for people to vote. We've taken away access to the voting drop box. But the point of all of this is whether it's a misappropriation of state funds to fly those folks to Martha's Vineyards, how much did the press conference with the governor cost our taxpayers? The point is, it's using people for political stunts. We're not using our resources, the millions of dollars spent to send them to other places. We could better use our resources. The bottom line is we need to start using our resources to serve people and respect people and not use them as political pawns and all of this. We have the resources in this state to solve our problems. We are not making wise decisions about serving our people. This is why I'm running. We need to get busy with the purpose of serving our people, bringing our resources for our education, lifting people up, not using them as political stunts, as we seem to constantly be doing.
Steve, can I address one thing there? So the comment was made about immigrants and migrants to put food on the tables. That's not what's keeping food off the tables. It's a broken supply chain from the administration. And going back to this idea that we're preventing people from voting, is my opponent saying we should have drop boxes open 24 hours a day and dimly lit side streets? I mean, we have to have somebody there to watch what's going on. That was the order given to me by a Democrat former county commissioner and mayor when she saw cheating.
We've had.
I think you muted.
Hold on just one second. You've mentioned that twice now, Chip. I think I know who you're talking about, but I'd like you to tell us who you're speaking of, who told you to vote for that bill.
I don't like to bring other people into it, but I did use their title. I got a phone call from former county commissioner Barbara Sharif, said someone in her campaign observed some folks in the campaign of the other county commissioner running for Congress in the special election and said there was stuff in the ballot boxes. And look, when I hear from a Democrat, not just Republicans on an issue, I take it seriously. And Linda's shaking her head. I think Barbara Sharif is somebody who I take at word, and her integrity is not something that I challenge with respect to her policies. I didn't always agree with her, but I enjoyed working with her for 8 years.
Okay, Chip, was it a good idea for the governor and for the legislature to create this Office of Election Crimes and Security? Why is it needed?
So the answer to that question is I believe it was. I think we, unfortunately, we lost him 2 weeks ago, but we had the person in there that can make sure that the statewide operation was done properly. And Pete Antonacci. The reality is there is election fraud. My opponent may not want to admit that, but if this vote was down to less than 0.5% and it went my way, I'm sure she would have a legal team ready to fight the election. The reality is, we had a fair and clean election in the state of Florida. We always need to make sure we continue to have fair and clean elections in the state of Florida. Okay. The other question you asked me about elections was, did President Biden win the election? Yes, we had a free and fair and clean election in the state of Florida.
Okay, Linda Thompson Gonzalez, would you have voted to create an Office of Election Crimes and Security, and why not?
No, it's we don't need armed police. We have volunteers, poll watchers who are trained. This is the job of our citizenry. We don't need armed police. Once again, using taxpayer dollars for political agenda. We've always had citizens fulfilling these tasks, and citizens should be involved in our democracy and continue to do their work.
That's not how it works, though, Steve. We don't have armed election police standing guard at the poll places. This is for investigations.
The stunt that this governor and you pulled to bring armed police in to Broward County was intimidating.
Hold on, Chip. I'm going to let Linda Thompson Gonzalez please finish making her point. I'll let you respond. Go ahead.
Yeah. The reason they were here is because there was a great deal of confusion. Voters voted to have felons who have paid their obligation to their community have the right to vote. And because the state has not set up any process by which a former felon can go and pay his dues, there's no process in this state for anyone to know what they can pay for their fines. So these 20 people who were out and arrested because they didn't know how to clear their record, there's no process in place for them to do so. So we have no process in our state.
What is your, I'm going to let Chip respond in a minute. What is your reference to the presence of armed police? What are you referring to there?
His security police, for the election police. I mean, he had, they were Broward policemen standing behind him for this press conference. And it's an intimidation tactic. Look, I've worked for many years in Latin America, and I see what people do to try to intimidate people. I was in Cuba when we had people coming up to our intersection there. So trying to replace our citizens, our wonderful citizens who want to work in the polls, with police, to a security police paid for by taxpayer dollars, that's completely unnecessary. We have citizens to do this.
All right. Chip, go ahead.
Well, Steve, you asked the question, and I was going to ask why she's labeling Broward Sheriff's deputies, who, by the way, they work in that courthouse. We pay them to work in that courthouse to make sure that people don't escape, and dangerous people who are in the courtrooms don't attack innocent people. So to say that our Broward Sheriff's deputies, let me get this right, our Broward Sheriff's deputies are being compared to Castro's army or Chavez's police, I'm not buying it. It's not for intimidation. Those are men and women who put that uniform on to protect everybody every day. With respect to felons voting, absolutely. I voted for bills in that space. I actually ran a bill on for people to be able to get their driver's license back so that they can go to work and not become a continued member of an illegitimate member of society and not be able to get their rights back and feed their families. But what it did exclude, and everybody who knows what Amendment 4 stood for, it excluded violent criminals. And if those folks that were arrested after that were told they could vote, well, they should know better if the law says that they were violent criminals or they were put in jail for murder or things like that. This is apples and oranges. I want every Floridian to vote who's had their rights restored. I've actually worked to help some folks through the clemency process get through that process. So apples and oranges, and don't anybody dare ever compare our Broward Sheriff's deputies to Castro's army. That's ridiculous.
15 seconds.
First of all, they were told by the state that they were given registration cards. In terms of our Broward police, there's no one who appreciates our Broward police more than I do. I'm a former law enforcement officer, and my niece is the police chief in Michigan. The point is that the whole setup for this press conference was intended to intimidate people and intimidate voters. And this is something that these stunts and these press conferences have been going on. And let's just get down. Let's focus on our voters. Let's have help voters register to vote without this added level of non-citizen participation.
Okay. I want to be sure I'm not missing Anthony Mann possibly having his hand up for a question. So I'm just pausing for that reason.
But I just, not to dwell on it, but Chip, just Representative Lamarca, could you just quickly explain why do you think that array of deputies was behind the governor at that press conference? What was the point of that?
Anthony, thank you. I didn't set the meeting up. I was told it was on election security, and I'm proud to stand for election security. The citizenry that Linda mentions a lot of times are on both sides now. You've covered it, Anthony. They could be members of the DEC, the REC. At the end of the day, we need to make sure everything is done right. And as far as the law enforcement behind them, they have look. I don't know why they were there. I have no issue whatsoever with them being there. The Attorney General was also there, and she's the top law enforcement officer in the state of Florida. And the reality is, they work in that courthouse. I don't think there's any issue with them being there. I certainly didn't take it as intimidation. It was a meeting to make sure that everybody understood that their vote would be counted. That was the whole purpose of election security. Your vote is counted, whether you bring it to the elections office, you put it in a drop box, you vote early, or you vote by mail.
And when Commissioner Sharif told you about ballot stuffing, did you contact the state attorney, or have you ever seen evidence or gotten reports of evidence of irregularities that you've reported to the state attorney?
I have not myself, but when I heard that information, it's a trusted source. I made sure that was in my, kind of my data research about the bill. And when I voted for the bill, I'm saying to myself, all right, well, I've been hearing things. I heard from other people on both sides of the aisle, and I have emails to kind of show that why election security is important. And that's why I voted for the bill, and I'll continue to vote for election security bills to make sure that people have an ID. People, if they can't afford an ID this year in our bill, you know, the election security bill, the part of it was to be able to give a Florida ID to anyone who couldn't afford one, to give one to everyone for free. So, I mean, this idea that we're trying to stifle the vote or voter intimidation, it's, you know, there's a reason why Florida is growing in population, and New York and California are going down. I mean, people want to be here. I mean, we can have this conversation on both sides of an issue, but when it's to protect my vote, I'm going to vote for that.
But you've never seen or heard of evidence of election fraud in Broward County that rose to the level that you thought it needed to be reported to authorities?
Heard, so secondhand, but not seen.
So you have nothing that you've ever has risen to the level of needing to be reported?
Well, look, you know, instances of you know, voter rolls not being cleaned in the past. I think it was widely reported that some members locally had done research and found a significant number of voters on the voter rolls, and guess what? They were cleaned up. So no, I haven't individually reported anything to the state attorney's office or the attorney general's office with respect to that, but there are instances that we've all seen.
Ms. Thompson Gonzalez, you're at a pretty significant financial disadvantage in this race. I mean, how are you able to mount a credible campaign, and do you know of any person or organization that's going to come in and try and do any spending on your behalf to give you more of a chance?
Yes, thank you. Well, we, as you know, we have been out registering voters for over the last year. Our campaign is really based on people and organizations coming out to support us. My donation base is from smaller donors, people who have been hard hit these last years. I know that a lot of corporations and a lot of large donors have come into CHIP's making contributions, but mine is from individuals. And frankly, we have organizations that have the Teachers Union, the AFL-CIO, SAVE, other organizations that have people who are going to go door to door who will help us. We have over 200, almost 300 individual donors, less than, I think, $90 is the average donation. But basically, the count, the vote, it's the voters that count rather than the donation by corporate donors. So we have the people organizations who have been out canvassing, going door to door, and it's the people power that's going to carry us in November. I'm quite confident of that. Political, we've had an uptick in the voter registration substantially in this district, and there's a lot of change out there in the face of the incumbent's voting record. People are fired up, and they're going to come out and support us. And it's the people power rather than the dollars that we care about.
And if I might on that, look, last election, you know me long enough to know that I won a seat on the county commission at an extreme financial disadvantage, and I also the next time had more money. But the last election, as you mentioned, $900,000 came in from a federal organization to support my opponent, and she also put a couple $100,000 of her own money. And so I'm not concerned with her not having enough money. But it doesn't say one thing one way or the other, you know, as far as if you have more money in a campaign or less, but you do need to fund it. And, you know, she brought up the BTU and AFL-CIO. I didn't even have the opportunity to have an interview with them before they went with her. So I think that came up in another interview you guys did. But the reality is, if I'm going to vote on things in Tallahassee for education, I would at least expect Broward Teachers Union, of which I'm a public school product, to reach out to me and interview me.
Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, real quick question, Chip. Earlier you said you were endorsed by police and fire. I want to ask Linda Thompson Gonzalez. Did you meet with police and fire unions before they interviewed Chip Lamarca? Before they endorsed Chip Lamarca?
No, I've contacted them a number of times. I've had some great conversations personally with several of the police chiefs, but I did not get an interview. I requested one. I didn't receive one.
For clarity's sake, Representative Lamarca, that is not specific to this race. We have heard time and again, particularly this cycle, in legislative and city commission races and county commission races, all across our coverage area that police and fire unions were not endorsing candidates in the races and were specifically going with one person. So I don't want to, make that like it's some sort of a Chip Lamarca thing.
No, I understand. I think one of the things I would point out is that if you're going to seek the endorsement of a law enforcement or first responder labor union, you need to speak to the labor, not to the chiefs, because they're not part of the labor.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to
Just quick follow-up.
go ahead. Quick.
Linda, would you have welcomed either the endorsement of the PBA or the FOP?
Absolutely. Said I'm a former law enforcement, a member of my family's a police chief in another state. This is our first responders obviously are key and such an important part of our community, and I support them totally. So I would welcome that. Absolutely. As I say, I've been in the community, I've been out at events and talked to a number of the police chiefs, and they've given me their cards. We've had some great conversations about needs of first responders. I will say, while what again is that one of my concerns is that we have a permitless carry legislation this next session. Our police chiefs are going to be very upset. Our police chiefs are very concerned about the increase in guns in our communities. It's a key part of our public safety. We need to keep people safe. I am a mom's volunteer. I'm endorsed by Everytown. People are afraid for their safety when they go out and there are guns. And police chiefs are concerned about permitless carry, concealed weapons. It makes our people who have to try to protect us, it makes them more unsafe. They are very concerned about these growing threats to our public safety and to all of those first responders who are trying to save us and protect us. I would welcome it and answer your question. Thank you.
I want to briefly go back to something that Chip Lamarca said earlier in this conversation. Chip, in discussing your position and support for restrictions on abortion, you refer to yourself as a, quote, pro-life Catholic. I want to ask you about something. The Catholic Church, as you know, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church in Florida is vociferously opposed to capital punishment and the death penalty. If your abortion views are influenced by your Catholic faith, would you also agree with the bishops that the death penalty is wrong?
Steve, that's an interesting question. And the answer is at 54 years old, I'm getting there. I think I think people like the Parkland shooter, I don't want to give him the justice of mentioning his name. I think the parents and the legal system would agree that he needs capital punishment. But with respect to other cases, I think I've probably evolved in some ways that if someone isn't a serial killer or a mass murderer of a family or something that is just not able to be rehabilitated from, then I believe our legal system with respect to life in prison might be the answer. And I've sat with the Conference of Bishops every year on this issue, and I think we haven't really had anything come up in the state of Florida like to that extent. But you brought it up, so it's probably worth noting. This governor has it's a strange fact, but this governor, from my understanding, has signed far less executions than Governor Christ, Governor Scott, and Governor Bush in the past. Which I don't know what that says, other than the fact that maybe the state of Florida is not in that process right now.
Are you supportive of the fact that he's signed far fewer death warrants? You think that's a good idea?
I think it's a case-by-case basis, but obviously it's something he analyzed, and if I looked at them and came to the same conclusion, then I would support it. It's not always the answer. I mean, I think if we're going to be philosophical or ideological about some of these things, you think that everything's cut and dry and black and white, and it's the more you deal with this, you realize that's not the case. Just like with respect to the abortion bill, I would have been more supportive of 20 weeks as opposed to 15, but we don't always get what we want. But you have to make sure we make a decision. And as you've seen in Tallahassee for decades, again, bringing a bill forward and getting something done sometimes is as important as getting it perfect. So if you can get something you agree with respect to the capital punishment in the state of Florida, I would certainly look at it.
Okay, I just want to say for the record too, and Chip, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but you said this issue hasn't come up, and maybe not on the floor, and that's not a coincidence. Your colleague in the Broward delegation, Representative Joe Geller, every year introduces a bill that would abolish the death penalty in the state of Florida, and it never gets a hearing in the Republican House. So it's not as if somebody hasn't tried to have this conversation. Would you agree?
I agree, and my good colleague Joe Geller also brings up the First Amendment Society in every single bill that we hear. I think he's a great human being. Disagree with him on some things, but look, I was in his position at the county commission and try to get things done, and some work, some didn't. But certainly, if it comes up, I'll take a serious look at it.
Linda Thompson Gonzalez, please comment briefly on this line of questioning. I've brought it up because I think that as a Catholic or not as a Catholic, you're looking for consistency of position, and if you oppose abortion based on your Catholic faith, I think people will respect that. But it has to be balanced against the fact that the Catholic Church hierarchy, as I've said, has for decades in this state tried to stop the death penalty.
Yes, let me go back to first of all, I deeply respect everyone's religion, and we need to. The point is that we do not have the right to impose our religious beliefs, our personal beliefs, on all of the rest of this country. This country was founded on a deep and abiding respect and a tolerance for multiple religions. We are not a country of one particular religion. I think when the Madison and they were fighting our founders, it was the concern with the Baptists. So we cannot impose our religious values, whether it's on women's right for their reproductive freedom, whether it's a death penalty. We must respect and abide by our tolerance for people of many faiths. And when we lose that, we are losing an important pillar of our democracy, because we are, we are imposing personal beliefs. And I believe that when we hold a public office, we have an obligation to separate our personal beliefs and act in a manner in the public that most tolerates the most people and does the most good for the most people. And we're not seeing that with this decision with Dobbs. It's
okay. All right. I just want to pause in case Dan Sweeney or Anthony wanted to jump in.
Let me just also, I am also opposed to the death penalty because of the way it has been implemented. We've seen too many cases where it's in our whole criminal justice system, it acts against a particular segment of our society. So,
right. Okay. Thank you. Do you oppose the death penalty in all instances?
There may be some instances, but it generally, because of the implementation of it, it has not worked fairly in most cases.
Well, do you think that Stoneman Douglas killer should be executed?
That's on the table, and that's on the table for a decision of them. And I don't want to comment and second guess that. But the problem with it is that it's demonstrated not to be a proactive, keep people from doing these crimes. And that's a very difficult decision that the jurors in that case are going to have to make. So I don't want to prejudge that.
Okay. I want to return to the subject of voting, and Chip Lamarca has a long, extensive, voting record, as does every member of the Florida legislature. And as I think you said early on, Chip, that you vote with your party when you think it's right, and you vote the other way when you think that's right as well. I'm going to bring up a couple of issues that you voted for in the 2022 legislative session that were vetoed by Governor Ron DeSantis. You voted, I believe, for the so-called net metering bill that was sought by Florida Power and Light, and you voted for the first version of a highly controversial Lake Okeechobee water recharge bill that ended up being redone completely. I think partly at the request of the governor. So here are a couple of occasions where you're even crossways with the governor of your own party. So tell us about your votes for those two particular bills.
So I'll do the second before the first, but I do want to go back real quick, Steve, if I could. We were talking about Catholic issues, for example, and you had mentioned some issues about death penalty. I'll bring up one other issue that I would hope in my heart that the governor and the Archbishop of Miami can sit down in a room and have a conversation about immigration, migrants, and people in this country, because I think it's not it shouldn't be a political issue. I think they should sit down in a room and have a conversation. That's been bothering me for a while, and I know that it's an issue that they can work out. They agree on so many other things. With respect to votes on those two, Senate Bill 2508 wasn't a bill to deal with discharge water in Lake Okeechobee only. It was the budget. It was the general appropriations budget from the Senate. And with respect to where where I was with it, sometimes you cast a vote and you wonder where the governor's going to be on it. And look, that's a vote that ultimately was made better by the process. The second, and again, that was an early vote. That wasn't a floor vote. The second piece of that, and those are things that call a conversation between both sides, both houses, and the governor's office, and we make things better. With respect to what was the first one you'd mentioned? I'm sorry.
The net metering bill that had to do with solar panels on residential homes and stuff.
So I'd spent a career practically in power generation and environmental sciences here in South Florida and in construction. And I have worked with the solar contractors, large and small. I worked with the utility to have conversations. And that bill, if you talk to Lawrence McClure out of Plant City, Riverview, you'd find that he had no idea going into that bill how much time of his time would be taken up in it and how much it would change and evolve. And I think where it got to was a place where the utility was not happy and the solar industry was not happy, but they could continue being in business. And the governor did what he thought was right and vetoed the whole thing. So at the end of the day, I'll give you one other example that you didn't bring up, but the pressures put on a legislator from Purple Broward, for example, on whether or not to accept whether the governor's maps, the House approved maps, that type of thing. I'm not in this to make friends, and I'm not going to be the governor's favorite Republican legislator because I'm from Broward County, and that's just the way it is. But I'm also not going to always be in lockstep with leadership in the Republican Party of Florida. And I think those are some votes that showed that.
Okay. I know it was just maybe an expression, a turn of phrase, Chip, and so I'll put that in context. But you've just described Broward County as purple. At least that's what I heard you say.
Sorry, District 100.
Oh, District 100. Okay, all right, fair enough. All right.
No, Broward County is very, very blue.
Looking back on, and I could bring up a lot more votes, but I wanted to ask you, looking back on it, it's an imperfect world. We're all imperfect creatures. You're making votes under intense pressure in Tallahassee, and everybody knows that. But I want to ask you, is there a significant vote you've taken in the 2022 session that if you had to do it again, you'd vote differently?
You know what? The answer at this point is no, for the simple fact that I don't know in the history, when I'm taking that vote, what things are going to happen. What I am proud of doing is making sure that, and Linda brought up the money from the Biden administration. I made a comment on the Florida House floor in debate. It said, they explained that whether they were Donald dollars or Biden bucks. Fact is, the federal government has been sending far too much money to states, and what we did with it under Donald Trump or under Joe Biden was put a significant amount of that money into reserves. And obviously in the prior administration, COVID issues. Fact is, I've had to press that green button or red button hundreds of times, and there's no undecided button, and my opponent has never had to press that button. I know that she ran for office in DC once before against the civil rights activist. Maybe she would have been able to press that button then, but at the end of the day, I've had to press that button for 18 years at local, county, and city, county, and state government. It's weighed on me at times, and sometimes it's been something that comes easy because I stand convicted on an issue. But sometimes I have quite a bit of concern about something, and that's when I get on the phone and start working. Thank God we can have conversations with bill sponsors in Tallahassee, unlike in Broward County. But we have those conversations and we try to make things better. Just like the vacation rental bill that they constantly ran to try to take all of our rights away here, as opposed to the one I ran that would actually create local government control.
Okay. I'm going to ask Linda Thompson Gonzalez to comment and react to what Chip has just said.
The point is that the incumbent has voted for an extreme MAGA to ban books, to ban part of our history, to erase a lot of our families and children from the public school, from free discussion of our families. He's voted for the net metering bill that fortunately the governor did a veto. He's voted to take away a lot of our home rule, the bill that would make it more difficult for our local community municipalities to govern themselves, to be sued by businesses. The wetlands, the pay-for-play water pollution bill would have greatly worsened our situation with our protections for our clean water, polluted our water, and so on. He's voted, he has to be accountable for these votes that he's taken. They have not been in the public interest. They have not served our people well. They have been votes that have really served a lot of the larger corporate interests. And we need to get back to the basics. There's been no action, again, to help our people with our most urgent priorities. They waited too long to schedule the insurance session. So all of these bills that he has dissembled on are really bills that have hurt people. And
Okay. The clock is becoming a major factor here, and we've covered as much ground as we could. But I do want to give each of you 30 seconds to a minute to make a impactful closing statement on your candidacy, your records, and why you're the best candidate in House District 100. And Linda Thompson Gonzalez just spoke, so I'll begin with you, Chip Lamarca. Go ahead.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Tony, for being on as well. Look, one thing about me, and you said it when you endorsed me in the past, so I don't always vote with my party. I vote with the people I represent. It was true then, and it's true now. I always take your calls, as you know, during session, whether we agree or disagree. And when we look at politics is done here in Broward, where they would not allow a Republican to be mayor, and the same games are playing in the legislative delegation, it just doesn't matter what other politicians think. I will always do the right thing. And when I serve Broward County, from being a reliable member to bring home appropriations like this Sexual Assault Treatment Center and other human services for Broward County, and being someone that stands with the arts community to get record funding or affordable housing funding, sometimes against our leaders in Tallahassee when it doesn't represent my community. I'll always be there for my community, and I always appreciate your endorsement and do just that. Thank you.
Okay, Linda Thompson Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you. Thank you with you. It is time for us to have new representation in the district. We need someone who will work to solve our problems and restore our trust. The many individuals and organizations that have endorsed me did so because they know the incumbent's record over the past 4 years, and they know that I will live up to their trust and do the right thing to protect our people, our privacy, and our human dignity. Broward deserves better. I'm ready to represent the true democratic values and needs of our residents. We need someone who will go to Tallahassee and serve our people and do the right thing for all of us, not just a segment of our population. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We're up against 10 o'clock, and thanks so much, Chip Lamarca and Linda Thompson Gonzalez, for participating. Thank you very much. Best of luck.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
So.
Thank you.